Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. Together we dive into the world of sci-fi and science fiction. From episodes of Star Trek, Star Wars, to The Walking Dead, Resident Evil, all the hot new science fiction movies from the back doors of Marvel or DC. The Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. You'll never look at science fiction the same way again.
GSMC Sci-Fi Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Alex. Today, we're going to talk about The Boys Season 1, Episode 8, otherwise known as the finale. So, in this episode, called You Found Me, we have Eric Kripke coming back to direct the finale. As we discussed in our first episode on The Boys, Eric Kripke is a remarkable director and showrunner whose work I have enjoyed thoroughly over the years, including a lot of his work on Supernatural and his work on Revolution, which starred Billy Burke, but also Giancarlo Esposito, who is in The Boys as well as Mr. Edgar, whom we really get to see in this episode. Additionally, J.J. Abrams and Jon Favreau were co-executive producers on this show, Revolution. So if you are into J.J. Abrams or Eric Kripke or Jon Favreau and you liked his work perhaps on The Mandalorian, or you're really into Giancarlo Esposito and you like apocalyptic themed television shows, then you really might want to check out Revolution. It is one of my favorites and one of, in my opinion, the most underrated shows that is out there in the speculative fiction realm. Now that we've done our shout out for one of my personal favorites, let's go ahead and dive into the finale of The Boys Season 1. So in this episode, things have really come to a head as we now know more about Compound V. We know that terrorists now have Compound V and superpowers as well. And that means we have a lot of bad news bears, honestly. In this episode, we also get to see one of my favorite actors who's worked with Kripke on Supernatural before, Jim Beaver, who played Bobby Singer on Supernatural, and is now playing another character named Robert Singer, who is the Secretary of Defense. That's a really fun callback to Supernatural, a very fun reference across the universes, and I really enjoyed that. It gave me a chuckle. So we have Jim Beaver, who's an excellent actor, and he is having his character meet with Stillwell. And so Stillwell is kind of in hot water right now because she's being met with the CIA and the Secretary of Defense to be confronted about Compound V. But at the end of the last episode, as Stillwell is being confronted about it and it seems she's in very hot water, it turns out that terrorists now have Compound V, and one of them has superpowers that allows him to torch an entire building explosively. I'm not quite sure if it's meant to be nuclear or not, but then he just walks out of the building still perfectly fine and wholly intact. Everyone else in the building is ostensibly dead, but this man has nary a burn nor a scratch on him. Interestingly and confusingly enough, though, his pants are still intact. I'm very confused about that part, but I digress. That's a problem for someone else, I suppose. Maybe he has pants that are resistant to incendiaries, or Edna Mode may also be in this series. Who knows? We'll find out in season 2. Maybe. Who's to say? That just kind of popped out at me and gave me a little bit of confusion. You might have even seen the question mark above my head when that happened. But we're going to move forward anyway. Now that we know that the terrorists have superpowers and Compound V, it's a problem because now the government is stuck between a rock and a hard place. They were ready to nail Stilwell and specifically Vought on the creation and distribution of Compound V, as well as the process of systematically over the years testing this and using it on babies all across the United States. However, we are now seeing that since there are supervillains, you need superheroes to fight them. This man is, of course, fireproof, and that just may be related to how the other superheroes tend to be very resistant to bullets and so on and so forth, and not necessarily strictly related to him being able to create fire from his body and torch everything around him. I'm sure we'll find more about him in season 2. But all of the missiles and all of the types of weapons that Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman and the other real-life military weapon suppliers have been making, all of the aircraft and all of the drones and everything are essentially rendered useless. No tank can take down Homelander, and that is why Susan, the deputy director of the CIA, was initially afraid of trying to take down the Seven and Vought anyway. And now they have shown their cards, and it turns out that there are super villains. So Susan and them took a little bit too long in this case, and now there is no turning back. They are stuck. This is also bad news for Butcher and the boys, because now there is no way that the government is going to do anything to jeopardize their relationship with Vought and getting them to now do what they were fighting to keep them from doing before. They're going to weaponize/militarize these superheroes. And we know that we're down to the 5 right now, since the Deep has been sent off to Sandusky, Ohio, and is just opening water parks and things like that in the middle of what he considers to be nowhere. And he's really upset about that, but they've kind of written him off from being in the 7 for the most part, following him being called out publicly for sexually assaulting Starlight. And then also him trying to rescue the dolphin and it going through the car window and getting ran over by an 18-wheeler. So it's just been a lot of problematic press and publicity for him for a while. And being the corporate machine that Vought is, they've just kind of shunted him away so that there's not really a lot of bad PR, but that hopefully everything will die down, and without him in the limelight, people will slowly forget about him. So we have his side plot going on as well. But this really means that since Translucent is dead, although the rest of the world who is outside of the boys and Vought believes him to actually be fighting MS-13 somewhere, the fact of the matter is we're down to 5. We have Homelander, Queen Maeve, Starlight, A-Train, and Black Noir still in the main Vought headquarters for the 7. But even though we only have 5 out of 7 of the 7, truly, they could always recall the Deep. And we have to keep in mind that they stated in early episodes that there are hundreds of these superheroes around the US, that they're stationed in different large cities and different smaller cities like Sandusky, Ohio, and they have different levels of powers. There are B-list heroes as well, as Popclaw and A-Train had discussed, and Popclaw self-identified as being one of them. In this way, we may have a whole slew of superheroes at Vaught's disposal to go and be militarized/weaponized on behalf of the US government. They have now found a niche in their market that only they can fill, which is just good business when it comes down to it. On the other hand, there is no telling how many others have been created in that time span. We're talking about the adult soups, the ones like Ezekiel and the woman with the wings who work expos like Believe Expo, in addition to Mesmer and the decommissioned folks and the B-listers who are perhaps just making films and doing Comic-Con circuits. There is no telling how many are of an impressionable age who may also be convinced to go into this military type service for their country and who may end up doing some really terrible things under the leadership of Homelander, who we have found at this point is truly a sociopath. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to talk about how Annie is dealing with learning that heroes are created in a lab. Stay tuned. You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now, don't bother, what's hot on Netflix, and everything in between. That's GSMCpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were introducing where we are at the beginning of episode 8, the season 1 finale of The Boys. Now we're going to talk about how Annie is dealing with things. Right now, Annie/Starlight has recently learned that heroes are not miracles created by God, as she was raised and led to believe. Instead, she has found out that they are created in labs intentionally by corporations and scientists. And that is really upsetting for Annie. So far, everything that she had envisioned her future to be has turned out to be disappointing. Her boyfriend is lying to her about what's going on, and indeed, Butcher just shot her on Hughie's behalf to make sure that Hughie could get away when she tried to arrest him. She has found that her mom is not really supportive of her and wants her to just suck it up for her sake, because as her mom puts it, she's waited 23 years for Annie to get to this point, and so it's not about Annie as far as her mom is concerned. It is about her. It's about her mother, and it's left Annie feeling very alone, except when it comes to Hughie. But now she's kind of been shot because of him, although he didn't pull the trigger and he was visibly surprised, but he does ultimately run off with Butcher. However, he does know, of course, that the bullet isn't going to kill her either, or truly really harm her. It's just gonna kind of sucker punch her for a little bit. So Annie is now left completely alone. No one in the Seven except for Queen Maeve trusts her. She is outright being watched by Homelander. We don't see him necessarily say that or following her around, but we know from his interactions with A-Train that he is ever vigilant. He's watching everyone. The same thing goes for Stillwell when we have seen him standing there looking at his own portrait in the wall, and really he's standing there looking through the walls into her office. Homelander is always watching everyone. So she is really distrusted by this man who wants to laser her, as Homelander would put it, and is a sociopath who is eager to discipline anyone he considers to be beneath him, which is everyone. Absolutely everyone. So she's in kind of a lot of trouble. She doesn't have a work family really to fall back on. She doesn't have the social support of a romantic partner or any friends really to speak of. The people she considered to be her friends and family on these Christian superhero circuits turn out to be folks she doesn't recognize anymore, and she doesn't hold the same values anymore. Although Annie does also point out that she's not sure if it's them who have changed or if she's the one who has changed. But she's only 23 years old, and she's been handed, at this point, everything she's ever dreamt of. Or she's earned it, rather. Annie put in a lot of hard work. I don't want to undervalue that. But she's finally achieved everything she's dreamt of, and it has turned out to still leave her very unhappy, and she feels probably more alone with having everything than she has ever felt before in her life. And now this extension of feeling alone and not having that sense of family has led her to her only parent, her mom. And now she's having to confront her mom for lying to her entire life about her own existence. She speaks with her mom and finds out that her mom allowed Vought to experiment on her as a baby, that she signed an NDA and that they did these experiments on her and injected her with the compound V, and that at first the dad was kind of okay with it, but later on the reason that her father left and Annie has these daddy issues and abandonment issues is really because of the fact that her mom agreed to let some corporation and scientists experiment on her and then lied to her for the rest of her life about this. And it's really turning her entire concept of her world on its head. She may have thought that her father has been wrong all these years and held a lot of anger against him for him walking out, but now she views it almost as though he was driven to leave because he wasn't okay with his daughter being experimented on and lied to. But with the NDA that was signed, there was nothing else that he felt he could really do. I hope to learn more about Annie's father in subsequent seasons. I think there's a lot to explore, especially as we continue seeing her in her hero's journey and seeing a lot of her personal growth. But a lot of this so far in this season is her coming to terms with her mother and everyone around her not truly being who she thought they were. And in some cases, like with her mom, it's very negative. With others, like Hughie, at least his lies are coming from a place of truth, if that makes sense. So Hughie is still largely on the side of the greater good, even if he did lie to her about it. Whereas her mother's lies are for her own self-interest. And similarly, her father leaving may have been a choice that he made that he felt was the best outcome at the time, and not one that was made out of selfishness. So we're really seeing through Annie's experiences that there are many shades of gray when it comes to the truth. It's back to that Obi-Wan Kenobi principle of everything is true from a certain point of view. And here we see that the same is really true for motivations. What may have first seemed to be something that was very selfish turns out to be not so. Something that you think should just be admitted is something that is unutterable in most social contexts in which these characters are living their lives. Indeed, would anyone have believed Hughie and the boys had they been forthright about this? Were they given any reason to believe that anyone would believe them if they were to be forthright and candid about this? Perhaps they would have just been in more danger if they had been honest with Annie from the get-go. We see here that her reaction is still very much in black and white. She's recognizing now that Homelander and the others beyond Queen Maeve are not necessarily good people and not necessarily to be trusted. But she still thinks that Hughie is dead wrong for killing someone, even if that person attacked him first, and even if that person ultimately was also a bad guy. He was not a great individual, translucent. But Annie, up to this point, has been unable to see those shades of gray. And so this experience with her mom and talking about her history with her dad is really helping her to see that. She can see that perhaps everything her mom did, which seemed nice at the time, was not exactly selfless and was in fact harmful in many ways and dangerous and just also very much fame chasing in a way, and that her father leaving was perhaps more of an act of protest in saying, you can't keep lying to our daughter. You can't keep this from her. You let them experiment on her, and this is not okay. You can't just lie to her about her entire existence. And if you're going to do that, I will not have any part of it. It's more of him standing on his principles and his values, the types which her mom has espoused in the past, but has not lived by at all. Like when we see that her mother wanted her to lie to the kids about being a virgin. And Annie's like, Mom, I'm pretty sure I wasn't supposed to lie to them though. Like, lying is also something that you are not supposed to do according to the Bible. But her mom is like, oh no, this concept of it is more important with virginity than the little lie that you're telling them. And that's really just all culminating in Annie beginning to see these shades of gray and understanding that not everything is as it seemed, and that there are layers of truth and lies everywhere around her, and that perhaps she should be reevaluating these motivations and this black and white justice type of perspective that she has held so dear her entire life. She's also beginning to see through Believe Expo that she had been participating in a lifestyle that was in black and white. This is right and this is wrong. But she's now seeing that there are shades of gray. She is feeling that they shouldn't be persecuting people who are LGBT just because they're LGBT. That doesn't mean anything in the grand scheme of things. Good people are good people, and she doesn't understand why they would be condemned or why someone has to go ahead and convert another person from another group when Jesus said to love thy neighbor. She's really having more shades of gray pop out at her as she is experiencing new things for the first time outside of that umbrella and the rose-tinted glasses that her mother has applied to her for her entire life. And we really also see that in her speech at Believe, in which she says that anyone who tells you that they have all the answers is lying to you. She has seen through a lot of lies at this point, and now her blinders are completely off. And much like taking the blinders off of a horse, it can be very jarring. There's a lot going on around you that you were unaware of before, and it can cause panic and anxiety. Blinders in horses are really used to keep the horse focused only on the task in front of them, only seeing that which they are dedicated to at the moment, only what the driver of the carriage really wants them to see. And it reduces these visual distractions. So it keeps the horses from seeing anything off to the sides or behind them that may make them panic or spook them or get off track from what the driver wants. And in this way, that is exactly what Annie's mother and all the people around her have done to her over the years. And now the only person who has finally come clean to her on their own, of their own volition, has been Hughie. That doesn't necessarily make him right or even forgiven. But in the midst of all of the chaos, this is something for her to hold on to. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to see Butcher's interactions with Mallory. We learned who she was in one of the most recent episodes, and now we get to actually meet her. Stay tuned. You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about how Annie is really getting used to seeing a world in shades of gray. Her blinders are off, and she's seeing that the world is not as she had been led to believe, and indeed, she herself is not as she was led to believe. So now we're getting into Butcher and where he is at this time, which is visiting Mallory, Grace Mallory, who was the woman who recruited him to work against Homelander and the Seven. And after we meet Mallory, we see she's very unhappy to see him at this point. When she invited Butcher to join them in fighting the Seven, and we see that she is the one who had shown Butcher that Homelander had assaulted his wife, Becca, and was the reason why Becca disappeared. We see that Mallory is perhaps kind of manipulative in that way. She was very much taking advantage of him in some ways, and was not doing this out of the pure goodness of her heart to help him. It may, in fact, have resulted in him being a lot more upset in the long run, and also turning him into the nihilist that we see today, whose brutality is only matched by his glee for it. We also see that she is partly holding Butcher responsible for her grandkid's death. So Butcher was in charge of the op that Frenchie and MM and Butcher were running to kill Lamplighter, and when Frenchie let Lamplighter go and went off mission in that way, Lamplighter tortured Mallory's grandkids to death, and she then dropped the case. We don't entirely know how Mallory was getting this intel before then, because when she showed Butcher what had happened with Homelander and Becca, she had a hold of security cam footage from within Vought. So she clearly had a connection at some point on the inside, but we don't get to learn that much about Mallory right now. Butcher has apparently been supposed to stay away from her and had promised her that, and you can tell that Mallory holds herself responsible ultimately for the death of her grandchildren, and she just wants as much distance from the boys as possible, even though she is the one who orchestrated this campaign against the Seven to begin with. However, Mallory is out there bird watching when they arrive, and after some griping, she does tell them that Homelander does have a weakness, and it's not going to be anything physical, but rather it's going to be his weird relationship with Stillwell, and that if he has any type of weakness, Stillwell is going to be the source of it. So Mallory does also get to really tell us who she is and her motivations with a single line, which is used to describe her retirement. And she says it was either bird watching or alcoholism. So, birds. She is very much a tortured soul, just as the rest of them are, but she has chosen somewhat of a different path than Butcher and the rest of the boys, at least insofar as we find her in the story now. She's also very adamant that she does not want to see Butcher or any of the others again, and that they should have stayed away the first time. Butcher isn't getting much from Mallory right now, but that will have to suffice for pushing forward in trying to attack Homelander. However, while he is out there trying to find another way to approach the Seven and to get rid of Soups once and for all, 3 of the boys, Frenchie, Kimiko, and Mother's Milk, are all staying in a motel room and having a chat. Kimiko has brushed her hair and really started to come around to everyone else a lot easier now that they know her story, and she's a little bit more at ease with everyone. But while they're doing this and they're just hanging out in this motel room, there's a special ops group that busts in, and they are most likely working for Vought. So they kidnap all of them, they knock them out with some type of gas, and even get Kimiko. She makes it as far as the parking lot before they are able to catch up with her. So all three of them are captured. And when Hughie and Butcher get back, instead of pulling into the parking lot, Butcher goes ahead and keeps driving past it. And when Hughie is confused, Butcher explains that the presence of that specific looking truck in that parking lot means that the others have been burned and that they are waiting for them to come back to catch them. So Butcher has decided that it's just going to be him and Hughie from here on out, and they're not going to go and save the others. Butcher decides that the mission is the most important. But Hughie is wanting to save his friends. That's just how Hughie is, and this is a fundamental difference between the two. Over time, we have seen Hughie kind of standing up to Butcher and the others a little more each time, and being more vocal about how bananas everything is around them. Being vocal about how Annie isn't a bad person. And his assertiveness is helping grow his heroism. So now we see that as they're fighting, Butcher is being kind of a jerk, or, by kind of. I mean, he's being an absolute jerk. That's just how Butcher is. And Hughie is really understanding why Annie might be so hurt, and how he's somewhat been a pawn in Butcher's mission to destroy Homelander and the Seven by any means necessary, no matter who is collateral damage. He truly still believes that all soups are bad, that there are no exceptions to this absolute that he has cultivated in his mind based on his experience with one specific soup, and then seeing some of the others interacting within the superhero clubs where it's mostly debauchery. And he's just really gotten so laser focused, on Homelander and the others that he is almost mad with single-mindedness. And Hughie is just realizing that he's been used, that Butcher ends up getting everyone around him hurt because he is just doggedly pursuing one goal, and everything else around him is just going to crap. How everyone around him is expendable in this way, and how in that way he's really not all that different from a lot of the soups. It's a really rough, startling realization. The big difference here is that Butcher really believes he's doing the correct thing, but he is doing it in the wrong way, in that he's letting everyone else get hurt and he doesn't really care. He's unsympathetic to the plight of the others, and he's going to just let everyone around him take the rap for whatever is going on. He is determined to go down swinging, to go down with the ship, and he doesn't care who else is on board with him when it goes down. He will not be launching any lifeboats. It's not that the others don't matter to him at all, but more so that his relationship with Becca and this thirst for vengeance are the only things that really matter in his life anymore, beyond the living, beyond whatever may have happened to Becca. He's just determined to take down Homelander or die trying. We're going to go ahead and go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to catch up with Stillwell and Homelander. Stay tuned.
Watching TV has changed over time. Streaming has become the new norm. That's why Golden State Media Concepts television podcast dives headfirst to the world of cord cutting. Want to be on the loop of what's hot in Netflix? Or if it's not a preference, what about original shows in Hulu? We've got you covered. Join us as we fill in the blank and talk about movies to stream and what show you should be binging. This is the Golden State Media Concepts television podcast.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were catching up with how Butcher and the boys are doing, and we find that the boys have largely been caught except for Hughie and Butcher, who have a fundamental difference in opinions regarding what steps should be taken next in either staying on mission and pursuing Homelander in the Seven, or if they should go to save the boys. Hughie decides that he wants to save the others, and he's going to have to walk away from Butcher's mission because his pursuit of getting justice for Robin is not enough of a reason for him to let all of these other people die. He's not going to let them become collateral damage like those folks that he saw in the collateral damage help group that he went to with Butcher. He doesn't want his friends to become like that. He does not want to become the monster that he sought to destroy, whereas Butcher is unable to see past anything but vengeance at this time. So now we really get back to Stillwell. She is at some kind of party for a lot of folks in their business. It looks like some sort of management or corporate party. And we see Giancarlo Esposito get introduced as Mr. Edgar, who is Stillwell's boss at Vought. We've only heard him mentioned really before, but now we get to see him, and I was elated to see Giancarlo Esposito in this role. The man is incredibly gifted, especially with characters who are in shades of gray. I'm very excited to see his portrayal of Mr. Edgar. We do see Starlight, though, kind of being in this party scene, and she is not quite comfortable. And Maeve is having a conversation with her in the bathroom. We know now that Queen Maeve really did start out like Starlight, and she really did give a crap about saving all of these people. And over the years, she just became more and more jaded with all of the crap around her. But she doesn't want to see the same thing happen to Starlight. And part of me thinks that this may be due to Maeve being the only woman for a while in this situation. She was one of the Seven, but she was also the only woman in the Seven. Her experience and Starlight's experience are more similar in many ways because of intersectionality than her experience is with Homelander or with A-Train or Translucent or Black Noir or The Deep. It's coming back around to how different aspects of who we are really shape who we are. Different aspects of our experience truly are what shapes who we are as people. And Maeve doesn't want to see Starlight go down that same path. I think Maeve is also perhaps realizing that letting the interactions with people around her really cause her to harden is not perhaps within her best interest. She does view it as being necessary because she knows that any of them who are in the Seven, who are superheroes, are technically invulnerable from a physical aspect, but not so from a social one. That if any of them have a weakness, it is the people that they care about. And as Maeve has explained to Starlight, if you care about someone, then you need to distance yourself from them. Because essentially, her veiled message is that Homelander will use that against you. And that Maeve has really used this, if you love something, let it go mentality to the extreme, and created herself a world where she is entirely isolated and hasn't really seen any light at the end of this tunnel until Starlight has truly come along. She reminds her of who she used to be, and I think that that is largely why Maeve is standing up for her. It's Maeve seeing the spark that was once present in herself, her youthful naivety and exuberance and passion for helping others. She's seeing them try to extinguish this like they have done to her in the past as time has worn on. And she does not want to see that happen to someone else. In this way, it reminds me of Robert Johnson's book, She, Understanding Feminine Psychology. Robert Johnson is a Jungian scholar and talks about feminine psychology, particularly as it relates to the story of Psyche and Eros. But Eros isn't as important to the story as his mother, Psyche's mother-in-law, Aphrodite. Aphrodite is the goddess of femininity, and she really acts in the world as a mirror. We meet Aphrodite in the world around us symbolically, in women or people who reflect back to us who we really are, rather than what we project onto others. She is a form of encouraging personal development. Aphrodite has a painful power for change that we feel when we're urged towards personal growth. Personal growth can be uncomfortable, but it can be powerful. And that new energy that tries to emerge from us is being held back continually by the old energy. And that is giving us the strength to carry on through the journey of growth. Psyche, on the other hand, is a lonely, kind of ordinary person who may be unworldly in a way and can't really relate to others in the world around her. She is young and she is beautiful and pure in many ways, but she doesn't really have anyone to feel close to. She has trouble finding deeper relationships. And their relationship with each other, after Psyche ends up being with Eros, Aphrodite's son, and then he leaves her because she has looked at him when he told her not to, and that is a representation of her inner masculinity, her animus, by the way. But we're going to shift past that right now. I want to focus on Aphrodite and Psyche as they relate to the characters in the show, specifically Queen Maeve and our heroine Starlight/Annie. So we see in this way that after Eros has left Psyche and Psyche is wondering what to do, Aphrodite gives her a series of challenges. She's kind of being a mean mother-in-law at this point, but it's also helping Psyche to become a fully mature, full person. She's becoming her full self. But at first, she's absolutely heartbroken. She doesn't know what to do, and Psyche tries to drown herself in her grief. But another god recommends that she pray to the god of love for help. And so she goes to Aphrodite, who is very annoyed by her, does not like her at all, and tells her that she has to perform a series of tasks of increasing difficulty. And they're metaphorical in nature. She has to sort through a big pile of many different seeds, and we see this concept echoed in the story we've discussed in the past on The Magicians, in which Margot has to find all of the black grains of sand and collect a big old bucket of them. It's also a throwback to this, and that episode is also a commentary on Margot really discovering who she is as a woman and reconciling the different parts of herself, her shadow and her ego. Similarly, we have Starlight and Maeve in these roles in different bits. There are bits of Aphrodite and Psyche in all of us. But first, Psyche has to learn the task of discrimination in telling things that are good from bad, right from wrong, things like that. How to see and notice the differences in the others around you, which is more or less what Maeve was teaching her early on when she pointed out that Translucent was in the bathroom with them right then, even though Annie was not aware of it, that she should never let them see her in that way. She can't be vulnerable around the others, or she can't show pain or anguish of any type, because that is vulnerability and that is weakness, even amongst these heroes. Aphrodite then tasks Psyche with not trying to take certain types of power into her own hands. In the story, she has to go and pick golden fleece from a bunch of rams. She's told she has to collect it, but the rams are very deadly. They're quite dangerous, and if Psyche approaches them at all, she is going to die. But instead, she learns to pick it from the low-hanging branches of trees that the rams chill underneath, and their fleece gets caught in. So In this way, we also see that she's learning how to wield power effectively, not displaying all of your cards. And Maeve is trying to teach Annie these things in Maeve's own way. And it's not necessarily out of the goodness of her heart, but it's very much a pick your own battles, kid. Do things a different way. There's more than one way to get the outcome that you desire. Although Maeve also is very jaded at that point and largely feels like some battles are unwinnable. We also see in the story of Aphrodite and Psyche how to order and set limits, how to focus on one aspect of life at a time. And we see Maeve learning these issues as well as she stands up to Homelander, even when we're not entirely sure if he's going to laser Maeve as well when he threatens Annie. So they're both learning some of these things together and stepping into their overall feminine maturity. We also see that Psyche has to learn to curb her generosity. Aphrodite sends her down into the underworld to obtain Persephone's beauty ointment, and Psyche has to set boundaries. She can't help everyone along the way. Some folks are there as a distraction and are not going to be helpful in the long run, and she's not going to be able to truly help all of those people if she stops anyway. And we're learning that with Annie and Queen Maeve. She needs to learn the difference between distractions and how her generosity can help versus be harmful. She also learns how to set boundaries, how to say no, and experience failure, because above all else, they are still human. It's putting the human into superhuman, and you have to kill the old ways of being before you can really achieve wholeness and integrating yourself, integrating that shadow with the ego. Now, I'm glossing over a lot of the subject matter here for time constraints, but I recommend checking out Robert Johnson's She, Understanding Feminine Psychology if you're interested, and do keep in mind that when he says feminine psychology, he does believe that there are feminine aspects in male and female personalities, as there are masculine aspects in male and female personalities as well, and that neither of these are inherently good or bad, but rather they are all parts of ourselves that we would do well to integrate together to become full selves. It's really about becoming whole, complete, and individuated people. In application to our story, it is really producing an exploration of what it means to become a woman, and indeed what it means to become a superwoman, a woman within the context of the world that Maeve and Annie live in. And just as Maeve is teaching Annie a lot of these hard life lessons, Annie is also teaching Maeve to soften up a little bit and integrate a bit more of her psyche with her Aphrodite nature. She doesn't have to be all warrior queen. She can be soft as well as strong, and in that way reintegrate the parts of Maeve's shadow that she's repressed, including those noble bits like really caring for all of the people she's trying to help. And instead of it tearing her apart, it can really bolster who she is as a person and give her a new reason and purpose in living the life she is wanting to live, instead of living it as others would have her live it. These women are both learning this lesson at different points in their lives, but overall, they are learning these lessons together and through strengthening each other. They're using their own strengths to promote growth in the other, whether they are always conscious of it or not. But we do see an example of this again as Maeve and Starlight are in the bathroom, and she lets her know, hey, I just want you to know that you don't have to give in to all this crap that they're doing. It's really bothering me seeing you perform this hypersexual role that they want you to perform out in public. And it's okay to be soft and to still be you. Because when you mentioned my autobiography before, I really did actually help those kids. That part wasn't PR. My arm didn't heal right because I broke it in so many places when I saved them. And you can still tell that it's here. There are still markers in me that show you who I used to be and who I am deep down inside. And Annie is in a way reawakening that in Maeve, while Maeve is making sure that the others and Vought in general aren't dampening out Annie's spark. It's a beautiful display of sisterhood, and I think it's also a really great display of feminine strength, as well as personal growth. We're going to go on another break, and when we come back, we're going to see where that leaves Stillwell and Homelander in this episode. Stay tuned.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were discussing the concept of Robert Johnson's book, She, Understanding Feminine Psychology, as it relates to Queen Maeve and Annie both working to integrate the different parts of themselves into a single unified whole. They're really on similar journeys, even if we are led to believe at first that they are totally juxtaposed, whether your binary opposites are experience versus inexperience, or naivety and cynicism. It really just depends. But they're really both on that journey towards integrating themselves into a unified whole individual, to being at peace with their total feminine psychology, integrating the Aphrodite with the psyche to become that whole person. There is also a component of masculinity as it relates to Eros and the Animus, but that's a topic for another day. Right now, I want to catch up with Stillwell and Homelander. So we've seen Mr. Edgar approach Stillwell and not only give her a big raise, but also let her know that she's being groomed to take over his spot in a few years. This is a big deal for Madeline. This is a really big win. She has been working very hard for this and is very much a career woman. This is what she has fought so hard for, what she has covered up terrible things for that the Vought 7 have done and that Vought themselves and she herself have done in the name of capitalism and in the name of PR, really. So Stillwell is stoked that all of her hard work is finally paying off. And she doesn't look up to the superheroes. She technically manages them. The only person she really looks up to and whose approval matters to her is Mr. Edgar. So this is a big deal. And you see her kind of freak out in what may seem an uncharacteristic Madeline way. But I very much am familiar with that feeling. She's got a big win, you guys, and she is going to let out a little eep of joy, more or less, and revel in it for a moment in a small way, even if it is kind of an outburst. But it's a small outburst because she is so stoked. So after she really gets to experience this, she has a conversation with Homelander off to the side. And we find out that Homelander is who created the guy with the incendiary powers, with the terrorist organization. I believe his name is Naqib. That is the word that was across his chest in a type of tattoo. It is kind of a big reveal, and Madeline is facing away from Homelander for most of that conversation, and then she turns around with a big smile on her face and pretty much thanks him for having done this. And he says, now we have villains all over the globe that only we can fight in sequel after sequel after sequel. Because that's really how they frame this. This is all kind of a game for Homelander. I'm not sure if he has even fought other superheroes before, and if he has, what the total outcomes have been. He seems to be sort of a mythological figure to a lot of them, though, with the way that A-Train and the others look up to him, and the way that Annie looks up to him before she meets him. She's kind of starstruck with the concept of getting to meet Homelander and getting to work with him when she first joins the Seven. She knows by now that he is a sociopath, but you get the impression that a lot of people the world over, including other supes who, by their powers, may be quite eligible to work with Homelander, still revere this man. They hold him in high regard, and a lot of them who know him better even truly fear him, even though they also have powers. Can Homelander's lasers cut through these individuals who are superpowered? I don't know. Homelander seemed to think that if Queen Maeve stayed on the plane with all of the folks who were on Flight 37, that she would die with them in the crash. Now, I find that a little bit confusing, to be honest, because if we're saying that fighter jets would not be able to take them down, and that different types of surface to air missiles or ground to air missiles or any type of missile would be able to take out these guys, that tanks wouldn't be able to take them out, why would necessarily a plane crash take her out? I'm not entirely sure. Maybe I just don't understand the physics of it. Maybe Homelander himself doesn't truly know what they would be capable of. I'm not sure what precisely the testing that he was exposed to as a baby and that any of the other infants were exposed to really looked like. I'm not sure if it's like a lot of the spy movies where you have different outfits being torched with flamethrowers and things like that to see if it works. Did they just kind of torch, Homelander as a small baby? I wouldn't put it past them. I mean, they did raise him in a padded room with nothing but that little blue blanket. But ultimately, we don't know what the testing looked like beyond we're going to inject babies with compound V and go from there. So who knows what could technically kill them? You get the impression early on that Translucent has to have the explosives keistered in him in order to blow him apart, not because he's a supe necessarily, but because he has that really carbon-coated skin. His skin is really a carbon metamaterial that bends light and makes him bulletproof. However, we also see that Queen Maeve is bulletproof, and really, so is Annie. In that way, they almost all seem to be men and women of steel, and it may just be that Translucent's carbon metamaterial skin is truly just bending the light around him to make him appear invisible, and that they all share this property of being invulnerable from the outside. So in that case, I'm not sure exactly what could take down Maeve and the others. It depends on whether Translucent had some additional properties, or whether they're vulnerable to lasers, perhaps. But it would seem that their skin is invulnerable, whether that be Homelander and Queen Maeve walking through a hail of bullets to stop a mass shooter, or Homelander drilling Maeve in the chest at point-blank range with a semi-automatic firearm. I don't know. Maybe they are vulnerable at a certain point, but I'm not sure why the plane would kill them and an explosion of the magnitude that Naquib walks out of wouldn't, unless that property is specific to him. But also why you would have to keister an explosive only into translucent. I think that we'll get some more definitions of their boundaries and limitations in season 2, hopefully, but it has brought up a lot of questions for me. However, we see that in this case, Stillwell is coming across at least as being happy with Homelander and what he's done. He's very excited by this. I think that Madeline seems pretty terrified with what he's done. This has definitely secured the necessity for Vought to go over there, but they already kind of had this in the bank before Homelander went and made something that could potentially cause an even bigger issue. Can they still keep a rein on him at this point? Are they going to be able to even fight these new supervillains? Who knows? But we do get a very weird scene that is highly sexual in nature, in which Homelander and Stillwell have intercourse while she is kind of baby talking him about being her sweet boy. It's very weird, very Oedipal, but very much true to this strange relationship that Stillwell and Homelander have been building throughout this entire season. The culmination of it does definitely make sense. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to catch up with Hughie and the boys. Stay tuned.
The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Travel Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about the strange relationship between Stillwell and Homelander, as well as raising some questions about the true invulnerability of the superheroes. Now we're going to catch up with Hughie. So Hughie has departed from Butcher after realizing that Butcher is on an at any means necessary quest for vengeance against Homelander and that everyone is truly collateral damage. So Hughie goes back to the motel and gets himself caught on purpose while pretending to be shocked about it so that Frenchie can use Hughie's retainer to bust them out. In an earlier scene that was very small, we determined that Frenchie can really pick any kind of lock using just about anything. So they break his retainer out of his mouth with some light hitting to help knock it free because it gets stuck. And so that's pretty funny. And we see Frenchie go ahead and let them out. And MM and Frenchie and Hughie escape, acquire a gun, and then go to get Kimiko free. So they have to fight through a lot of guys to get to that point. Poor Hughie has to fire a gun, an assault rifle as it appears to be, pretty blindly. He does not really know what he's doing, but Frenchie has already been shot and MM is going to get Kimiko. And he tells him, man, she better be worth it. Like, you pretty much better love this woman. But he risks his life and he goes and gets the girl for Frenchie. And she has been drugged up essentially so that she can't be fighting right now, which totally makes sense. They had her locked in a cage before. Now they have her kind of doped up with chemicals. But it looks like they're about to get shot, really. It looks like they're going to get executed when Starlight comes in and saves the day. So Starlight goes ahead and comes in and she just starts blasting. And when she does, she takes out all the baddies. So we got a whole bunch of the boys free up until A-Train, who is clearly hopped up on Compound V, comes and confronts Starlight and Hughie. So now A-Train thinks that Homelander was right all along and that Starlight has been working against them, which isn't true. Starlight just decided that ultimately in this new world with shades of gray, Hughie is on the side that most closely approximates that of justice and goodness. So they have the others go ahead and escape, and Starlight tells Hughie to go, but he won't leave her. So Starlight and A-Train fight. But unfortunately, A-Train has taken too much Compound V, and as he'd been warned in previous episodes, it has been really taxing on his heart, and it gives out just before he's able to take out Hughie. Hughie could not handle watching another person die, though, even if it's the superhero who killed his girlfriend and didn't even really care about it. He made jokes about it instead. And A-Train clearly considers humans to be inferior and to be truly collateral damage. But Hughie isn't able to take the path that Butcher has had him on up to this point, and instead he starts CPR on the superhero who is responsible for his girlfriend Robin's death. Annie then tells him to go, that if they catch him, Homelander and them will kill him, and she will call it in and she'll take over the CPR, even though it means that A-Train will likely also out her to Homelander when he comes back to following his heart attack. Hughie is also reminded by Annie that if he lives, A-Train will never stop hunting Hughie down. Both of them have decided to live with this risk of losing their lives in order to do what they both believe is the right thing. They have found their set of values. They are stepping into their power and doing what they believe they should do, what they believe is right, even if it ultimately will cost them. They're willing to go down with the ship in the way that Butcher is, but from a healthier vantage point. They're not doing this for vengeance. They're doing it out of a sense of morality and what they believe should be done in a person's life. It's quite admirable and ultimately quite heroic. So our heroes' journeys have really started in different places from different perspectives, but they are ending up coming to a head at the same point. It's very important as we move forward into the end of the episode, though, to understand that not all stories have happy endings. We have a lot of things that have gone sideways. At least everyone is still alive, but we find that Butcher is now at Stillwell's house. Stillwell has come home from a long day at work, and then her weird encounter with Homelander, only to find Billy Butcher is in her house, has knocked out her nanny with a dosage of something. I don't remember if it was chloroform or what, but she's chilling in the backyard somewhere. He's not a full monster. He's put her at least outside, so she's not at risk, but the baby is upstairs. Teddy is upstairs. So Butcher goes ahead and straps Stillwell up with C4 and gets Homelander to come to her. His plan is to kill Stillwell to get retribution for Homelander killing Becca. But Homelander has been out doing some homework of his own. He's found out that Stillwell and one of the scientists who had raised him had both lied to him about what happened with Becca Butcher. He has found that the other person, the doctor, has told him the truth, and now he confronts Stillwell about it. And she says that she loves him and that she's afraid of him. So he thanks her for telling him the truth, and he kisses her, and then he lasers her. He blasts his laser eyes into her eyes and just melts through and burns her face, her crania, absolutely everything. It's really gross, but also really believable as to his entire story arc. even as it is a bit shocking. He also makes sure to threaten the baby a lot beforehand, just to make sure we know that he hates this baby. So now Butcher is standing there in the room with dead Stillwell, Homelander standing over her smirking, being like, what you gonna do now? And the baby somewhere close by, definitely within range of being killed. And Homelander's like, what are you gonna do about it? What are you gonna do now? What's your new plan? And Butcher's like, he had not intended to survive this situation anyway. He has come to terms with the fact that Becca is most likely dead, and he is willing to go down with this vengeance ship. He has no reason to live. So he just stares him in the eyes and goes ahead and flips the switch on Stillwell's C4 vest and blows up the entire house. Granted, the baby is dead, you guys. We do not get to see the baby, but I get the feeling that Homelander did not save this baby. But that technically, Butcher did kill the baby, too, because he's the one who pulled the trigger. So that's a little dark, and gives us a bit of a different perspective, considering earlier Butcher had not killed the baby Soup that they had found in the hospital, despite his assertion that all Soups are evil. But he did just kill this possibly human baby. I think that Teddy was supposed to just be human. Who knows? And I'm hoping the babysitter was far enough out in the yard, but again, who knows? So Butcher is blasted in this scenario, as is everyone else who is in the general proximity of the home. But to his surprise, he wakes up on the lawn with Homelander standing over him. And Homelander's like, aren't you glad I saved you? And Billy is just very confused, because mostly he's probably also concussed. For whatever reason, though, Homelander's decided to save him. The whole scenario is just bewildering for Butcher. And then Homelander tells him, come on, you're going to want to see this. And he's very stoked about something. So he waves at Butcher and walks across the lawn as Butcher kind of looks up to see a young boy with blonde hair walk out of a home in the yard that they're in. And from behind him, his mother walks around the corner, and it's Becca Butcher. She is, in fact, still alive. She didn't die on the table. It looks like she also signed an NDA and kept the baby without telling Homelander or any of the others about it, including her husband. So now Homelander also has a son who has powers much like him, and we don't know how he's going to guide this young man who looks to be about, 8 years old. He is definitely of a very malleable age and now has kind of 2 dads, maybe? I'm not sure exactly where they're going to take that, but I am excited for it. The desolation in Karl Urban's eyes, Billy Butcher's eyes, when Becca comes around the corner. There's so much hurt and shock in them, and I'm very excited to see what Karl Urban does with this character in the next season. We get to see some real nuance as well with Billy Butcher, I think, in season 2. I'm stoked to see how his approach changes, how Queen Maeve's and Starlight's changes, and what having a son is really going to do to Homelander. I imagine he's still going to be a complete sociopath and just try to pass those traits along to his son. Who knows if the Deep is coming back? Are the 7 the 5? I don't know, but we're going to see how that plays into the next season and hopefully see some more of Giancarlo Esposito's Mr. Edgar as well, since his intermediary Madeline is no longer in the picture. They've recently released the trailer for season 2. I'm excited to see all of the characters who are back in the show for season 2, and I'm excited to see where they take this gory exploration of a satirical approach to superheroes in America and in the realm of capitalism, truly, in this next season. Season 1 was released on July 26th of last year, I do believe, and Eric Kripke has said that he thinks it'll be pretty similar this year. We're already at the end of May, you guys, so getting The Boys Season 2 may be just around the corner, and if you have not checked out the trailer for next season, I encourage you to do so. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Sci-Fi Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please subscribe to the show, and writing a nice review always really helps us. Also, if you could please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, I'd appreciate it. Thank you kindly, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.